education. Education is power, education is entertainment. So in this video, we are going to talk about the two economies of India and South Africa. We will compare and contrast the economies of India and South Africa in respect of poverty and poverty alleviation. The capital of India is New Delhi, and its child malnutrition, there is high child malnutrition rate in India. There is also electricity rate, high rate, and human development index is very much low. On the other hand, South Africa, South Africa's human development index is also is a little bit somewhere medium, but in case of the whites, it is high, and but in case of black, it is very low, and it has three capitals. Pretoria is the administrative uh, capital, and Cape Town is the legislative, while Bloemfontein is the capital of judiciary of South Africa. We will talk about the comparison and contrast of the two economies of these two giant countries, South Africa and India. First, we are going to talk about India's economy. With one of the highest poverty rates in the world, 52.5% in the year 1996, and by far the greatest number of people living living on less than $1 a day or every day, 509 million people compared to China's 274 million people. India epitomizes the problem of absolute poverty. I emphasize absolute poverty. Partly this is because India is geographically the largest country in South Asia and the seventh largest in the world. India has the world's second largest population with almost 990 million people in 1998 and a rate of population growth that averaged 2.0% during the past decade. Its 1997 per capita income of 390 US dollars is still one of the lowest in the world outside of Africa. Its rapidly expanding population has not only retarded economic progress but also put increasing pressure on natural resources, contributed to severe environmental deterioration, and produced a labor force whose growth and size continue to exceed the economy's absorptive capacity. Absolute poverty remains widespread. Illiteracy exceeds 60% for women, and the infant mortality rate remains close to 73 per 1,000. Over 50% over 50% of the world's poor reside in India. Poverty claims over one third of India's rural population and one fourth of its urban residents. So, this is the case of poverty in India. India has granted India was granted independence in 1947 after a long struggle against British rule. Nadira Rehan has been connected with us. He said, "Hi, Nadira Rehan. Hi. Good life. How are you? We are talking about the two economies of India, of Asia continent, and another country is South Africa of Africa continent. We are going to compare and contrast the two poor countries in the world in respect of their poverty alleviation, poverty reduction." Okay, Nadira Rehan, fine. I'm also fine. And how is the live going on? Please keep commenting and keep watching until the live is over. The live is going to be covered 22 minutes plus. Okay, let's go back to India. India was granted independence in 1947 after a long struggle against British rule. The former colony was subdivided into India, primarily Hindu nation, and two Islamic states known as Pakistan. One of the two eventually became Bangladesh or Bangladesh, present day Bangladesh. India was for many years a socialist democratic republic with a federal government inspired by the British parliamentary system. However, in the late 1980s and in 1990s, India began to move away from its socialist economic and political orientation and aggressively adopted, accepted, received aspects of market capitalism. Agriculture is the most important economic activity, occupying three quarters of the labor force and accounting for 28% of GDP. After the Green Revolution of the late 1960s and early 1970s, agricultural production started increasing at an annual rate of 3%. This was due largely to improvements in agricultural technologies and irrigation system. As a result, India became self-sufficient in grain production. It was able to increase its wheat production from 10 million tons in 1964 to over 45 million tons in 1985 within the time frame of 20 years. While total food grain production rose to 150 million tons in 1984, production kept up with rapid population growth by the year 2010. However, it is estimated that India will need 280 million tons of food grain each year to feed a population that is projected to expand by another 100 million. This will be a very difficult task, particularly because Indian farmlands have suffered severe ecological damage through deforestation, soil erosion, and other degradation, which have affected over 2 million square kilometers of land of India. Although GNP or gross national product grew at an average rate of 5.3% in the 1980s, the parallel growth of population led to smaller gains in per capita income. Cotton and jute textile production is still the most important industrial activity, although large publicly owned and operated manufacturing companies producing steel, machine tools, electric and transport machinery, and chemicals have existed since 1960. In the early 1990s, many of these state-owned enterprises are being transferred into private hands through the process of privatization. Important new initiatives that the Indian government has undertaken in the 1990s include the gradual deregulation of industry and trade, favored by a system of incentives and a set of policies aimed at encouraging the transfer of advanced technology, specifically the privatization of the telecommunications equipment sector, the liberalization of exports for the electronics and computer industries, the introduction of more flexible production processes in automotive and machine tool industries, and the adoption of several measures to facilitate imports of capital goods represent the bulk of the new development initiatives followed by the Indian authority. Economic growth has allowed India to achieve some success in the battle against poverty. despite the still high population growth rate. Three major policy directions contained in the seventh five-year plan 1985 to 1990 emphasized the importance of an export-oriented growth program designed to generate foreign exchange, the need to expand anti-poverty efforts and human resource development, and the desire to slow the rate of population growth. In 1991, a new government initiated a fresh set of economic reforms, including currency devaluation, designed to Shubhashis Chaudhary, good night. Okay, Shubhashis Chaudhary, good night. How are you? And what about the Indian situation? What about the politics of India? We are now talking about the poverty and economy of India and those of South Africa. We are comparing and contrast. In 1991, a new government initiated a fresh set of economic reforms, including currency devaluation, designed to promote exports and curtail imports, a reduction of production of subsidies, import duties on capital goods, and quantitative import restrictions, a progressively liberalization of interest rates to promote saving and investment, a revision of the personal income tax system, and a speed up of the privatization process with further encouragement to foreign investors. However, after 7 years of reforms and relatively good economic growth, India's new Hindu nationalist government, the Bharatiya Janata Party or BJP, announced in 1998 a change in policy that stressed Swadeshi or economic nationalism. In particular, the BJP was going to take a second look at the policy of lowering import tariffs and eagerly welcoming foreign investors. As the Indian economy turned away from the socialist model that traditionally guided its economic development and moved toward greater reliance on free markets and a more open economy, there were increasing concerns that any improvements in economic efficiency and economic growth may have been achieved at the expense of greater income equality, higher unemployment, continued environmental damage, and declining real income for the poor and middle classes. Thus, the major challenge facing any new Indian government in the 21st century will be how to balance growth with equity, efficiency with employment, food production with distribution, and free markets with poverty alleviation, all while dealing with rapid population growth and mounting ethnic violence between Hindu and Muslim fundamentalists. It will be surely a daunting task for India to alleviate the poverty rate existing now. Now let's talk about the economy of South Africa. One thing we have to remember that India represents the classic case of poverty in the third world. On the other hand, South Africa, probably more than any other country, reflects the dilemma of inequality. But South Africa is in the midst of monumental and unprecedented change after many years of white supremacy, white rule, and black segregation in the context of two countries, one rich and the other poor, within a common border. Contemporary South Africa is undergoing a delicate transition. If successful, it could turn out to be the most unexpected peaceful transition from white to black rule in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. Some historical background of how South Africa reached its present situation is in order. People have inhabited southern Africa for thousands of years. Members of the Khoisan language groups are the oldest surviving inhabitants of the land. However, only a few are left in South Africa today in the western sections. Most of today's black South Africans belong to the Bantu language group, whose members migrated south from Central Africa, settling in the Transvaal region sometime before AD 100. The Nguni ancestors of the Zulu and Hausha occupied most of the eastern coast by 1500. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to reach the Cape of Good Hope, arriving in 1488. However, permanent white settlement did not begin until 1652, when the Dutch East India Company established a provisioning station on the Cape. In subsequent decades, French, Huguenot refugees, Dutch and Germans began to settle in the Cape Colony. They form the Afrikaner segment of today's population. The establishment of these settlements had far-reaching social and political effects on the groups already settled in the area, leading to upheaval in their societies and the subjugation of their people. By 1779, European settlements extended throughout the southern part of the Cape and east toward the Great Fish River. It was here that Dutch authorities and the Hausha fought the first frontier war between them. The British gained control of the Cape of Good Hope at the end of the 18th century. Subsequent British settlement and rule marked the beginning of a long conflict between the Afrikaners and the English. The discovery of diamonds at Kimberley in 1870 and of large gold deposits in the Witwatersrand region of the Transvaal in 1886 caused an influx of European, mainly British immigration and investment. Many blacks also moved into the area to work in the mines. The construction by mine workers of hostels to house and control their workers set patterns that later extended throughout the region. The reactions of white farmers, especially Boers, to this influx, along with British political intrigues, led to the Anglo-Boer Wars of 1880 to 1881 and 1899 to 1902. British forces prevailed in the conflict and the lands were incorporated into the British Empire. In May 1910, the various republics and colonies formed the Union of South Africa, a self-governing dominion of the British Empire. The Union's constitution kept all political power in the hands of whites. In 1912, the South African Native National Congress was formed in Bloemfontein and eventually became known as the African National Congress, or simply ANC. Its goals were the elimination of restrictions based on color and enfranchisement and parliamentary representation for blacks. Despite these efforts, the government continued to pass laws limiting the rights and freedoms of blacks in 1948. The National Party, or NP, won the all-white elections and began passing legislation codifying and enforcing an even stricter policy of white domination and racial separation known as apartheid, which means separateness or being separated from each other. Apartheid is an African word which in English means being divided, or a system of division between the black people and the white people. In 1984, a new constitution came into effect in which whites allowed coloreds or persons of mixed heritage and Asians a limited role in the national government and control over their own affairs in certain areas. And ultimately, however, all power remained in white hands. Blacks remained effectively disenfranchised. Popular uprisings in black and colored townships in 1976 and 1985 helped convince some NP members of the need for change. Secret discussions between those members and imprisoned ANC leader Nelson Mandela began in 1986. In February 1990, President F.W. de Klerk, who had come to power in September 1989, announced the unbanning of the ANC or African National Congress, the political party to which Nelson Mandela is a member, and all other anti-apartheid groups. 2 weeks later, Mandela was released from prison in 1991. The Group Areas Act, Land Acts, and the Population Registration Act, the last of the so-called pillars of apartheid, were abolished completely. A long series of negotiations started, resulting in a new constitution promulgated, declared into law in December 1993. The non-racial elections were held April 6 to 29, 1994, resulting in the installation of Nelson Mandela as the president on May 10, 1994. Until 1991, South African law divided the population into 4 major racial categories. 1. Africans or black, 2. whites, 3. coloreds, and 4. Asians. Although this law has been abolished, many South Africans still view themselves and each other according to these categories. Africans comprise about 75% of the population and are divided into a number of different ethnic groups. Whites comprise about 14% of the population. The coloreds trace their lineage to the earliest settlers who married indigenous peoples. They comprise about 9% of the total population. Asians descend from Indian workers brought to South Africa in the mid-19th century to work on the sugar estates in Natal province of South Africa. They constitute about 2% of the population and are concentrated in that area. Education is in a state of flux. Education is in a state of flux. Under the apartheid system, schools are segregated and the quantity and quality of education varied significantly across racial groups. Although the laws governing this segregation have been abolished, the long and arduous process of restructuring the country's educational system is just beginning. One immediate goal is to reduce the black failure rate on the school leaving examination. It remains at 51% compared with only 3% for whites. The long-range challenge is to create a single, non-discriminatory, non-racial system that offers the same standards of education to all people. South Africa has a broad-based, industrialized economy that paradoxically shows most of the characteristics associated or connected with developing economies. A division of labor between formal and informal sectors, a highly unequal distribution of wealth and income, a dependence on commodity exports, and a legacy of government intervention. The formal sector, based on mining and manufacturing, is well developed. Smaller but important agricultural and service sectors exist. Despite a strong private sector, there has been substantial governmental intervention in the economy. There also are a number of large government owned corporations in South Africa. Economic policy has concentrated on the formal sector, but since the mid 1980s, the policy has sought to develop the informal sector, focusing on education and training, job creation, and small business assistance. The transition to a democratic, non-racial government began in early 1990, stimulated debate on future economic policies to get sustained economic growth, redress the socio-economic disparities created by apartheid, and improve the standard of living for the majority of the population. The government is pursuing market-based policies with the private sector as generator of wealth and the government trying to address inequalities in health, education, housing, and social services. It has embarked on a 5-year, 10.5 billion US dollar reconstruction and development program intended to reduce unemployment, provide free medical care to pregnant mothers and children under age 6, and electrify houses in African populated townships and build 1 million new homes to accomplish its goals without undermining business confidence. The government's first year budget called for continued continued fiscal discipline and strict monetary controls. South Africa aims to establish and maintain a pro business environment and is encouraging both foreign and domestic investment in this country. South Africa has rich mineral resources. The only major mineral products it lacks are petroleum and bauxite. It is the world's largest producer and exporter of gold. I am telling gold, and also exports a significant amount of coal. The value added processing of minerals to produce ferroalloys, stainless steels, and similar products is a major industry and an important potential growth area. The country's diverse manufacturing leads the world in several specialized sectors, including railway rolling stock, synthetic fuels, and mining equipment and machinery. Agriculture accounts for 5% of the gross domestic product or GDP, focusing on citrus fruits, corn, dairy products, sugarcane, tobacco, wine, and wool. However, because of inadequate and erratic rainfall, only about 15% of the land is suitable for farming. South Africa has many developed irrigation schemes and is a net exporter of food. The transportation infrastructure is well developed, supporting both domestic and regional needs. The telecommunications and electrical infrastructure provides fast word service to wide urban areas. The economy is recovering from a 5-year recession thanks primarily to significant gains in the agricultural sector. South Africa's economic future looks hopeful, with GDP expected to increase and its currency, the rand, expected to depreciate against the dollar. However, several sector factors could alter these forecasts, including future commodity prices and the duration of the rebound in the global economy. Exports and imports account for more than 24% of GDP, with the lifting of sanctions imposed to protest apartheid in 1993, the United States regained its position as South Africa's principal trading partner. Other major trading partners are Germany, Japan, and the United Kingdom. Trade with other sub-Saharan African countries, which represents a considerable portion of South Africa's trade, has continued to increase substantially. Although South Africa has abolished apartheid, the country's native black Africans still live in an entirely different world from the whites. South African whites, 14% of the population, own 88% of the country's private property, and along with foreign investors, over 90% of commerce and industry. Over half of the black population lives below the poverty line, and 40% of rural black children are stunted by malnutrition, with a black illiteracy rate of 33%, and over three-quarters of black teachers unqualified for their jobs. The educational system continues to perpetuate a vicious cycle of deprivation and discrimination. The distribution of income between whites and blacks is among the most unequal in the world. Most unequal in the world. The United Nations Development Programme noted that the disparity between whites and blacks in South Africa is 4 times larger than in the United States. With average white income per capita almost 10 times average black income. Moreover, if South Africa were a separate country, it would rank 24th in the world just after Spain. Black South Africa would rank 123rd in the world just above Congo. Not just two different peoples, these are almost two different worlds in the country South Africa. Countries in the country. In March 1995, President Nelson Mandela, the Nobel laureate for peace, unveiled a new economic plan. It discontinued the long-standing dual currency system to promote foreign investment, and it allocated 1.5 billion US dollars for housing, education, and employment creation directed to the poor. Such social expenditure is important because, in addition to high white-black inequality and an alarming increase in AIDS, the worst problem facing the South African government is high and rising unemployment. After the relatively slow growth years of 1995 to 1998, GNP grew by just 2% per year, and massive job cuts in both the private and public sectors. More than 1/3 of the population is believed to be unemployed. Still, the South African government has high hopes that future growth, projected at 3.5%, will dwindle. The ranks of the unemployed and past and existing inequities will soon be diminished and eventually eliminated. It will be a fascinating process to watch. So that's all about a tale of two economies, India versus South Africa. In India, alleviating poverty, uprooting poverty, abolishing poverty from the lands of India where there are a lot of Hindu and Muslim fundamentalists is a daunting task. On the other hand, having been able to see South Africa as one of the best countries in economy will be very enjoyable to watch. I hope you did enjoy listening to this lecture, very unique lecture on the economy of India and South Africa. I think no one tells you about this. If you wish, if you enjoy this, please comment and subscribe to the channel and share the channel links to your friends and families. This is a channel of education and entertainment. Last of all, the thing that I always say is that be positive, think positive, stay cool headed, stay calm. Try to do charitable works to people who need, and eat a balanced diet, very nutritious diet, which will make you physically fit and psychologically strong and active. Thank you. Bye bye. Once again, wishing you all to watch all other videos in this channel. Wishing you all a good health and good hygiene. Thank you. Bye bye. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.